Hi, friends. Logan Clements here with the Better Events podcast. And in this week's episode, we are talking about building a better event resume. In this, we're going to dive into if you need a resume, what should you put on that resume, spanning from new pros to folks making the pivot into events, but they might be a seasoned professional, to veterans. Mary and I will share a little bit about what we have on our resumes and how we use them both as event professionals and as business owners. And we'll dive into how to showcase your experience as well as prep for that interview and just what that looks like for us these days. So there's some tangible tips and tricks, including one mind-blowing one that I have for myself that I think is going to be a game changer for me with building my network. So we hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. This is Mary Davidson, one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by our wonderful other co-host, Logan Clements. And today we are going to have a fun topic all about building a better event resume. And it will be fun. Do stick with us. There's lots of angles and tips and tricks that we're going to throw in that are probably applicable to you regardless of what your involvement is in the industry. So definitely stay tuned for that. But before we get into it, we have our conversation starter. So Logan, first of all, hi. How's it going?
It's good. Mary, it's summertime. I mean, it's nothing better than some warm weather.
Yes, absolutely. Logan's somewhere pretty warm right now. I'm headed somewhere really warm. And so it's quite warm, but we love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, Logan. So in that mindset, what is your favorite summer smell?
This is the funniest conversation starter, Mary, mainly because I was like, weird question. And then I've sat here being like, I don't know if I can pick one.
Exactly.
Because I really, really like the smell of the ocean. And I've gotten some pushback when I've told people this because they're like, what is that? The smell of fish? I was like, no, it's like salt. It's like the salt air. And I just have really big nostalgia for going to the beach with my family and knowing when we got close enough to the beach, you could roll the window down and you could literally smell the ocean. And that's something in Seattle from where I live. I sometimes can smell it. And if I walk 10 minutes towards, we do have some beaches in my neighborhood, I can really smell it and it always makes me really happy. So I'm not going to say a food answer. I'm going to go with final answer, Mary, beach/ocean, the ocean smell. Nice. How about you? What's your favorite summer smell?
My brain keeps going to pineapples. I don't know. Do I actually eat pineapples very often? No, I do not. But that is what summer is reminding me of. And I actually do love the smell of pineapple. I have this pineapple candle. And yeah, it kind of gives me summer vibes. So because that's where my brain's going, that's what I'm going to say.
You have that's like a tropical summer. I like it. Pineapple.
Yeah, tropical.
I didn't know you had a pineapple candle.
I do. I use it in the bath.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There you go, fans. If you need to get Mary a new gift, you can get her another pineapple candle.
I'll take it.
Well, before we jump into this week's topic, we do want to plug our private Better Events community. Those of you that have already made the leap, this is our way, I guess this is your way, listeners, that you can support Mary and I on this creative journey to both create this free podcast that we're putting together, but then also get access to some really awesome bonuses. At this point, we've had 2 episodes drop exclusively for our private community. The first one featuring our moms, which was such a fun episode to record. And then another one more recently, just a little bit of kind of a raw, real talk from Mary and I about how we've been doing so far in 2024. So that's just a way, if you've gotten any value out of what Mary and I have been giving you here on this main feed, just consider becoming a paid subscriber. It's $8 a month. $75 a year if you just want it once a year. And we really, really are grateful for those of you who have already joined us over there on Substack. So click the show notes to find out more. Now, a little bit more about why we picked this topic. We always call out at the end of the episode for you to connect with us on LinkedIn or in social media And this is a question we actually got from one of you listeners, Casey Powell. She reached out and asked us this question on LinkedIn about what to put on her resume and how to prep for interviews in the event industry. And so we figured, what's a better time than now, especially the summertime for some folks is a slower season. If you are someone who is not in a slow season, I will raise my hand. I'm very busy this summer. I will probably save this episode to revisit later in the year when my schedule slows down. But this is a really good time to revisit your resume, whether you're new to events or someone who is a seasoned veteran and just needs that reminder to keep your resume in whatever shape you need it to have it nice and updated. So let's get into it, Mary. I guess my first question, Mary, do you have a resume, and how have you used it as a business owner?
I have a resume, like a personal resume. It's the same one that I've had since college, so a long time, just using that for whatever. Do I use my personal resume? Only when it is asked of me, which is not very often. The times it has been when like someone's trying to refer me to a freelance role and like they want to pass my resume on to them. But I often say, but here's my LinkedIn, which is a little more updated. Like, because LinkedIn is automatically, I think, just more active. So I think that's what I actually utilize more or try to push. What about you, Logan? Do you have a resume?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's one, I'm sure this question from Casey, I don't know if it was in the context of full-time employment or, contractor, but I guess my point would be that everyone needs a resume because yes, Mary, I have a resume. I think I get asked for it in the same context as you. I'm not necessarily applying for full-time jobs or even formal jobs that get listed somewhere. A lot of the roles I get are word of mouth or someone finds me. Again, LinkedIn has been a really big, we'll get a little more into that in this episode, a big lead generating tool for me. But I do have a resume because it's the same thing, like you said, Mary, that I get asked. Usually it's something that needs to be sent to someone, to like a third party. So a middle person recommended me, but they're vouching for me with someone else. And a lot of times the vouching helps, but you often need some kind of a paper, something that shows that you do know what you're talking about. You do have this experience or these are your strengths. And so, yeah, I've kept my CV, and I call it CV, I realized, which I think is a carryover from my time abroad, where internationally, like in China, they don't call it resume. They call it your CV. So that's just, I forever will continue to call it my CV. But I update it all the time. And it's one that I try to do it every couple months. And sometimes, again, I only wait till I get asked to do it, but it does incorporate everything I've done on my own. And then I as my own business owner, and then I have tweaked it depending on what type of event I'm kind of getting recommended for or trying to put my name in for.
Mm. Yeah, by the way, I Googled CV. I've always wondered this because when people say CV, I'm always like, you mean cover letter? But that's not the right.
No,
Like,
not that.
it's Latin, if anyone wants to know, for curriculum vitae. Is that how you say it? I don't know. But
Yeah,
there you
curriculum
go.
vitae. I didn't think that. I honestly, thank you, Mary, for fact checking me. I couldn't have remembered exactly. I remembered it. I was like, it might be Latin. I think it's meant to just, again, that's coming from probably more the British education system, which makes sense because some of that made its way over to Asia, um, faster than American education did. So, but yes, I think it's really important. So, Mary, I guess then, what do you put on your resume? You mentioned your LinkedIn's more up to date, but kind of what do you have on there as a business owner and an event pro?
Yeah, I'm going to answer this in kind of a two-part actually, because Logan, I know that you have a pretty solid resume, so I think you're going to have some good tips and tricks here. Mine is okay, I'll be honest. Like I don't really have that many things, but I did update. Well, because first of all, so being a business owner, I'm like, what do I put on here? And it's obviously for events, so I'm trying to go event specific. So I've gone with like try to put some numbers in there. Worked with this many speakers, this many years of experience, this many attendees, typically like some numbers like that. But it's kind of hard to capture like that information, I feel like, in there when you're doing a lot of variety of events. So what I do lean on more besides LinkedIn is a business resume, which I think I've talked about before. So I'll answer this question talking about that, and Logan, you can answer talking about whatever on your side. But our business resume is cool. If you want to email us, I'll send you a copy of it. It's also on my LinkedIn if you all want to check it out. It just has an example. But it's like about the company, about the team, just a really brief. like services we offer, kind of just like a sample of some services bulleted out, a list of some past and current clients and linking to our website, a blurb about pricing that doesn't say any prices. It just talks about like our model and how we do customized proposals, and then like links. So it's in a way a typical resume, but I've like shifted it as a business. That is what I use all the time. So that's become more useful to me. That's probably because I'm trying to sell a team normally than myself more. So that's what I'll share about that one. But Logan, what about you on your resume?
I mean, you got me. I'm like, should I have a business resume as well in addition to my personal? But yeah, I guess mine is more kind of a straightforward resume. I will say I've updated it since college. I had like a black and white one that I just felt like didn't cover my personality, I will say. And when this is back when I was looking for full-time jobs and doing full-time work for other folks, I had a friend who was like, I love designing things. And so she kind of just helped me pick some fun fonts and a fun color. And so it's still black and white, but I have green for my name and then my headers for my different sections. And then I play with, I think I have like two different fonts happening throughout my resume. And I felt like just adding one color to my resume made me feel like it's more me when I send it to people. The funny part, I'm realizing I'm like, blue is my brand colors for everything, but I still like the green. I think it's a fun pop of color. But yeah, so my resume I have kind of like a personal 3 sentences of kind of like a personal statement that is really summing up what I do and also kind of the roles how I want to be talked about. I talk about in like the third person, like I have it, I guess I could read those sentences. It's like an event producer with a passion for creating engaging and memorable live events, navigating the technical production setup and managing client relationships. Specializes in event production, show flow, run of show management, working in multicultural and multilingual environments, and speaks Mandarin Chinese. With over 9 years of in-person and virtual event planning and project management experience at over 175 events, including, and then I list out like the Olympic Games, US Open, international volleyball, corporate sales conferences, nonprofits, webinars, etc. And then I list some event roles, and that's the top of my resume, mainly because I want to use that to frame how people then read the rest of my resume. So that's kind of the like those 3 sentences are hopefully putting in my mind. If one of those words jumped out to you, they're like, oh, that's what I need. I also like the Mandarin Chinese in there because if it's not relevant, it's at least like a fun fact. I stand out from other people. I used to bury that, and I've been giving feedback that that's a fun fact. And then my work experience in there, I have my main is my Logan Strategy Group, my company, nice front and forward. And then I have started actually breaking out, even while I worked for myself, I have started breaking out my individual, especially my big sporting events that I'm really proud of and I'm allowed to share that I was a part of, like the Olympic Games. I have that as its own line with its own title. And if you look, the dates still align that I was freelance at that time. But those just kind of pop it out a little more. And then my favorite part that I have at the bottom that I put in years ago and I loved is that I have a section called favorites. And this is like my interests, my hobbies. I think right now I have it as black coffee, Agatha Christie novels, handwritten planners, hot pink blazers, homemade Chex Mix, and anything sports. And then I also have a travel section where I list the countries I've been to, because both of those feel important. If you were someone trying to think about, do you want to hire Logan? Like those are all parts of me. Mary, I don't know if you have a reaction to that.
I love it. I think it's great. But I wondered like, and I do think a lot of this comes down to like what kind of situation are you applying for? And I kind of feel like that flies really well for the jobs that you're probably applying for, especially being like more of a freelancer. Someone could disagree with me. I'm not totally sure. But if you're like applying for a full-time job, it just seems like people are like really quick, the hiring managers, to like weed folks out. So what's going to grab their attention? It's your experience more than your probably like personal stuff. That doesn't mean it's bad. I don't think it hurts unless somebody's like, I hate sports. And then you probably don't want to work with them anyway.
That's how I viewed it. It's at the bottom. It's just, again, it's like, it's just meant to add some literal like personality to it. And yes, I agree with you, Mary. Like, I think it wouldn't hurt you. And if it did, you don't want to work there anyway. But that, I start with the experience. I try to pick out some of the buzz names. And then, I mainly send this for freelance gigs for, again, if it's someone who knows me, but they're not the hiring person, they want my resume. Or maybe the end client has to sign off on me getting hired for that role and they're looking for it. So I do tweak my resume between being more sports focused, or I can tweak it a little bit more to just highlight more of my corporate more formal nonprofit fundraising event experience, but I don't find that I have to use it that often. Probably every year I maybe send my resume out 4 times for
Yeah.
like maybe 4 projects. But I just think it's really important that I think you touched on one, Mary, too, is the difference. I treat my resume and my LinkedIn is both have my experience on there, like the organization, a bullet or two. On my resume, though, I put more specific numbers, meaning like I will say a rough number for the budget that I managed for an event. I will actually say the number of people that were on my team. So I drill in a little bit more on the numbers in my resume because that's what helps stands out. Instead of saying I managed an event budget, saying I managed an event budget of $800,000 or even 20,000. I mean, listeners, it could be even if you manage an event budget of $10,000, like putting a number on it just helps anchor it that like, oh, that's a real thing you did versus just something maybe you pulled from Chat GPT or the internet that just said like, I'm responsible. It's like, no, I managed a team of 20 brand ambassadors on site for 5 days. Instead of just saying I manage brand ambassadors at my event. Which one's more memorable? So I don't necessarily I put some of those numbers on LinkedIn, I think, if you go back and look, but I don't put as many as I do on my resume because that's like a private look at my history.
Yeah. Anything that helps you stand out. And when we were recently doing our hiring process, I had the opportunity to look at a lot of resumes. And I've done some hiring before for like different jobs when I was in college and stuff, but this one I was like really invested in the resumes. And I was like, oh my gosh, the moment you're on that side of it, you learn so much about what like looks or works well in a resume. It was just, I don't know, it's really mind opening. So I don't know if at any point you all have access to other resumes and can just like really dive into other people's because you'll learn a lot based on what you see. And so that was like really eye opening for me. And the biggest thing really was you have a lot to look through. And so just if taking 5 minutes to change words in your resume so that they match keywords that they might be looking for in the job description, that will automatically make you stand out. So many people apply that seem like they have no relevant experience, or I have to interpret if they did, and that was hard. So if it was just way more obvious, that was automatically in like a maybe bucket for me, just because it was more clear. So I definitely agree with what you've said as well, Logan. And we talked about this thing always that you need the experience to get the gig, but you need the gig to get the experience. And so for a newer emerging professional to the industry, what do you do in your resume to kind of capture those things? And I feel like event planning or event production, whatever you're doing at events, luckily there's a lot of universal things that you have probably done before. Like, thank goodness. It's not a super hard skill industry to a sense. And it probably depends like what role, but yeah, there's just a lot of ways you could reword things because I'm sure you've planned something before. I'm sure you've gone to events and have seen things before. Like you have probably worked with a vendor in some capacity. You've been to a venue. I don't know. You can just like, there are experiences you've had. So take time to just think about what you've done, even if it's for your personal life, because it's probably applicable. Logan, what would you add to that?
Totally. Yeah. And I think I would just don't overinflate your experience. I think that's the funniest part. I see it is in people's like job titles. Like if you are someone just out of college, you probably aren't a director of something. I've seen some people name themselves that. Granted, if it's an organization at your university and that's truly the title, do that. But if it's just you were part of a club and you were on the event committee or chair of the event committee or something, I wouldn't overinflate it, but as Mary said, think through maybe the job description and what experience you have that is relevant, because yes, anything you do, I think it would apply. And this is also where we've talked about on this podcast. If you have the opportunity to volunteer at an event, that is something you can put on your resume. You can put that you were an event assistant, or you could even write volunteer. I have it for me for the Olympics back in 2018. I wrote volunteer, but I wanted to be able to put Olympics on my resume to show someone I had been there and I had experienced from the inside as a worker, not a paid worker, but a worker, what that looked like. So you can still do that. And that's still a resume builder. I also think if you're new to events, or just any industry, you really just need a one pager. I'm sure, Mary, there's a debate here. I'd be interested for what resumes you reviewed. How many were one pagers versus two pagers? Because I am currently a two pager, and I think I made the switch about 5 or 6 years out of school because I had a number of different jobs, and so I did want to incorporate them all. And now I hold steady. I mean, I have to usually edit things out or remove them from my specific ones that I'm putting together, but I keep it all on my master resume to make it fit on 2 pages. It's a humble brag, but like we've done enough stuff now at this point, 10 years in, that you're going to have a longer resume. But Mary, what did you see when you were hiring?
Most are one page, but there were some that were 2, and that didn't necessarily deter me. Now, I'm not like a hiring manager full time, so they probably have different opinions. But for me, the 2-pager wasn't necessarily like, oh, I just was like really kind of like, well, what's good enough to fill up 2 pages? And sometimes it was. So it didn't deter me at all.
Mary, what would your advice be then for someone who is maybe new to events but a seasoned professional and looking to build their resume?
I mean, if you're a seasoned professional, I still think it goes back to you probably had experience doing something. If you've had a career in something, even more applicable that you've done things that the skills that we use in events, which we can link in the show notes. We have a podcast episode all about skills every event professional should have. And so that could be a good one to listen back on and think if that applies to stuff that you've done before. So definitely check that one out as well. Um, Logan, is there anything that you'd add for seasoned event pros and their resumes?
Feel like I touched on it for just kind of how I've listed it out. I think figure out what works best for you. I love your business resume, Mary. So if you're someone with a team and maybe an individual resume doesn't feel like it fits, even if you are an individual, I could see doing a business resume is just a nicer way to think about it. Like you said, overview, services, people you've worked with. For me, again, yeah, it's just making sure you check in with yourself. Again, the jobs that ask me for it, I will say, is my natural check-in, but just make sure you've updated your resume.
Yeah,
There's some people I know out there who have not done it in years, and that's fine. Give yourself grace, but you should probably update it because it's just nice to do. And that's also a good reminder if you haven't updated your LinkedIn, which, Mary, I think if we shift into LinkedIn, I feel like that is a place that is even more important than your resume to keep updated with what you're working on, the roles you're interested in, your experience. What are your thoughts, Mary?
Oh, for sure. I think LinkedIn is a wonderful place. And it seems like, I don't know if it's where we're at in our careers, but it seems like it's a bump in place. Like everybody's like pushing to LinkedIn, it seems. And so I think it's good. Honestly, first step, yeah, just to have one, because I will look up people, and if I can't find them on like social media or LinkedIn, I'm like, are they a real human? you know? And so have one, post sometimes so it looks like you're actually invested in the community. And I think that alone actually like really, really is helpful. People talk a lot about that. I think it's called the about section. It's like that first section where you can write like a paragraph in LinkedIn about yourself. And I think that's where you can pull stuff from your normal resume, like those numbers and those keywords and just stuff about you. I don't know. That's the section I think is most challenging for me on LinkedIn is I'm like, what do I put and what covers everything and what kind of angle do I go? And so LinkedIn is a wonderful thing that it's very public. And so check out other people in the industries, their LinkedIn, and just see how that applies to yours. Recently, I've also been trying to get some folks to like endorse me on those skills that are near the bottom of your LinkedIn page and things like that. Like Logan was saying, just keep up on it or once a year, kind of do a recon on your page and go ask people that you met to endorse you or leave you a LinkedIn recommendation. And my last thing is on LinkedIn and those recommendations at the bottom, they're like reviews people can leave for you. And I love asking for LinkedIn recommendations and then giving them out as well when after I work with someone. I think that really, really helps you look credible. And I've used those reviews too on like my website as a review, or I have like this testimonial doc I'll send to clients sometimes if I'm trying to like potential clients. And so you can take that, and use that other places as well. But it's a great place where people can personally review you, which is really valuable. I feel like I could talk about. We should have an episode all about LinkedIn and just like
we
go
definitely
into it more.
do. Yeah, I think we'll have to have another episode on LinkedIn. I mean, Mary, you just my key tip there. Then for myself in my post event process, I send an email asking people to review me on Google and Facebook. I'm going to add the link for my LinkedIn too, because maybe people don't feel like they want to post on those sites, but maybe they're good for a LinkedIn review. That's so great. I think my only other comment, and this is just more a networking thing, if you are someone who is going to events and handing out your business card, please make sure you have a LinkedIn. and make sure it's updated. I don't know, Mary, about your system for CRM, but for me, I've turned into now I kind of just try to connect with people on LinkedIn after I've met them in person at an event. And I had a stack of business cards from an event I went to this year. And I have to say, maybe 25% of them were not on LinkedIn, which blew my mind, or I just couldn't find them. But like I searched their name that they put on their business card and I couldn't find them. And I was like, okay, I don't know how we're going to keep in touch really. You know, they have their email, but I don't have time necessarily to keep people individually updated. So that's one to think about. And then lastly, just before we get to the end here, how to prep for interviews. This is one that I think, again, as a freelancer, I have a lot of informal interviews. So, Mary, I guess you could maybe think about how to tackle this because you were the interviewer. But from being interviewed, my advice for most event professionals is to come prepared with a couple stories. And by stories, I mean these are your experience, something you did or were a part of, or even if you're new and you're just starting, even witnessed. But you're always going to be asked probably how you had to solve a problem on site. How did you overcome a challenge? So having something of an example where something didn't go according to plan and how you handled it and how you reacted, and maybe a reflection or two, of what you do differently. And then also often with a team, with when you're getting hired, you're getting asked to be a part of a team. And so some example of dealing with some kind of people conflict. So whether it was working with someone who was difficult to work with, or even dealing with a difficult attendee can be an example. But having, I'd say 2 to 3 stories that kind of touch on that in your back pocket will help you be more prepared because you're going to get some of those basic questions. And again, you can pull from experience that you've volunteered at, you've worked at, whatever it is, but just making sure you're ready and not kind of having to sit there and think through what's an example. Mary,
Yeah.
what would you add?
Some things that have like caught me up before that people have asked me are obviously everything you just said. And then they've asked me what my favorite events are, or like the ideal roles that I like, which should be an easy question, but it's something that I was like, oh, I actually really need to think about this. And so that's been one. Some have asked for examples of events that I've done before, and that's one where I like can grab that information pretty quick. But I don't know about you. When someone asks me something like that, so specific about events or clients, my brain like wipes out. I'm like, I can't remember like any event. I can't even tell you what events I've done this spring. Like I can't just remember that off the top of my head because there's like so many moving out all times. I like really have to sit and think for a second. So that catches me up. So maybe just kind of do a little reminder to yourself of what you've been involved in. And what else? I kind of think everything you kind of covered, Logan, but just sit with yourself for a minute and think about your experience. And I think there's a lot of value too in being honest, like about what you're looking for. And like really, I'm like a true believer, and like no one is truly going to advocate for you except yourself. So if you want that, you need to really come prepared to sell yourself. Like don't leave that call wishing you had said something. Like make sure you get it out there and use your time wisely.
Yeah, another one I would also say is if you can, I'd come prepared with a question or two for the person, for the interviewer. That is something that I think in my early days I would forget. Or again, you're so focused on your answers. And again, I got to interview people that we were hiring at a company I worked full time for. And that was one that I think I realized that I was like, I wanted them to ask some questions, whether it's about the culture or, what's our communication style, or, what do the weekends look like as somebody who works at events? So that is something to come prepared with a question or two for them. I have found personally when I have that helps me, I feel like, leave them with a positive impression that like I joke I'm the queen of questions, so I need to back it up and actually come with some questions. It is okay in some contexts if you truly don't have any, but I just found that's a good, if you have one or two in your back pocket. I feel like you go online, you could find people always ask like, what's your favorite part of working here or something. But we talked about boundaries on this podcast recently in the last couple episodes. So that's also one to just figure out what the fit is for that job. Everybody's in different circumstances, but sometimes you want to make sure you're the right fit for them. And you want to make sure they're the right fit for you if you have that flexibility to kind of pick and choose what you want to say yes to.
I love it. Yeah. So many tips and tricks. And this is a great topic because I think we could talk about this on and on. So if you all have stuff to add to your experience and what's worked for you, please do let us know. We're happy to share it out in one way or another with folks. And I think that brings us to the end of our episode and the bonus tip, which I have that today. So I'll just keep talking. This might have been one before, but we're going to bring it back again. It's relevant to me right now. When you are doing an event or a conference or something that has a lot of speakers, use a speaker tracker, whatever that looks like for you. But I think many of us do that. But then it's just like this is your friendly reminder to use that tracker because it's going to save you so much headache. Start collecting information there, anything from a speaker name, their email, what session they're in. If you have sent them, like if they registered, if you've sent them a note before you go, email, or so many other things. Have you gotten their headshot, their bio? Just think about all the email back and forth and save yourself a little bit of hassle and start that speaker tracker as soon as you possibly can. So that is my bonus tip for today.
Thanks, Mary. Follow-up question to that would be tracker, you mean as like an Excel document, or what is our
I use an
formatting?
Excel document. Yeah, something like that.
Love an Excel. Thank you, Mary, for this week's bonus tip. That brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com, or you can connect with us directly on LinkedIn. Mary and I love hearing from you. It inspired this week's episode. So keep doing that, please. And as always, we encourage you to join our paid community on Substack, click in our show notes, or go to our website to find out more information about that. And as always, we thank you for listening, and we'll be back in your feeds again next Wednesday.